but I'm actually going to make a new one. So I'm going to click New and then click Create a File. And I'm going to be presented with this page. If you'll sort of remember, this is the same page sort of setup we had before, but I'm going to do an extra layer of setup here. There's this button that will be enabled once we've turned on our templates. And it's a little drop down, and it just says selected document template. And then here are all of the HTML templates that are available to me. So let's say I want to just get 2 columns of text. I will click on this, and this warning is pretty important because these templates can't be applied to pages that already have content in them. So essentially, when you apply these templates, they replace everything on that page. So this is just warning me, are you sure you want to replace your existing content with this template? Your existing content will be deleted. My page is empty, so I'm just going to hit replace. And you'll see here, if I bump this out to full screen, this is what this particular HTML template layout looks. So if I wanted to change my header, I could go up here and type my new header. Oh, so you'll see if I select the whole thing and delete it, that's not a big deal. I can always just go header 1, title, select it, go to format, and then reapply my style. So there's all of this sort of pre-set up style that you have access to. And in this template, they will always look the same. So if this actually needs to also be a header 1, I can always switch that. Or I can make it a header 3. So don't ever worry about having to like fiddle around with that sort of thing. You can always sort of undo it. And of course, if I make a mistake, I can always just do the undo command on my computer, Control Z to get it back. So nothing's really lost if you make a mistake. And I'm just going to start by pasting in that content from my course that you saw before. And this is a really long column now, but you'll see my text is right here. I'm not sure why that knocked the other column out, but I'm going to try this. There we go. That's better. So basically, here's the content that I copied in from my Word document, and it just kind of sits there. And you'll notice it will continue to, since this template's responsive, got to be careful what you copy. Doesn't matter how much text I put on this side, it'll scale the page that way. So you can kind of, it has a lot of flexibility. And if I want to instead add text to this side, I can, of course, just click and wherever my cursor is, paste text. If I wanted to put some text in this, we call these call-out boxes. And they're essentially there to just sort of add some visual interest to your course, call a particular attention to a certain fact or something like that. Paste my text into that, and it will grow in size to suit whatever content you have inside of it. Now, if for whatever reason I don't want that, I can just highlight it and backspace. So I don't want to call out, I don't need a call out, you know, I just highlighted it and then I hit backspace. So highlight all the text inside of it, and once it's all gone, backspace, it's gone. So not every page needs a call out. You can always delete them. Now, adding them back in is a different sort of task. So I'll show you how that looks. So basically, you can't really do that without muddling with the HTML a little bit. So if I paste that here, you'll notice I didn't catch, even though I pasted this text, I didn't catch the box it was sitting in. So to do that, I actually have to go into my HTML source editor. Now, those of you that are comfortable with HTML, well, this is a button I think you might be pressing a lot. So it's in the bottom right corner, HTML source editor. This will pop up an extra modal here. And this is the page's HTML. And you'll notice our templates have our CSS, our bootstrap rather, with our CSS down here. That's how we control the content. We have some extra divs and containers that help the page be a little more responsive. And if I scroll down here, you'll see Jumbotron. Jumbotron is what we call this type of callout. So the callouts you saw before, that blue box, you can name them whatever you'd like if you just switch them in the CSS. This one is called a Jumbotron. So if I just copy that and paste another one below it and hit save, you'll notice now I have 2 callout boxes. So that's a pretty easy way if you have an HTML element that you'd like to apply to a page, instead of pasting in, just a bunch of text, you could always try to copy an element from one page to another by pasting it directly within the content, the code editor, rather. And once you get into this template, you can, if I highlight the image here, so, that's a weird, wonder why it's doing that. I think it's because, oh no, there's just 2 images. Okay. If I wanted to switch out this image of ice cream, which the template's filled with pictures of ice cream. It makes it really hard to look at for a long time. But and if I wanted to, let's say, replace that image, I would just attach the image the same way I would in any other template, by highlighting it first. So that's meaning I'm kind of doing a replace, and then I click insert image. And now this is going to ask me, okay, you want to put an image into this page. Where is the image right now? And if I were to upload a picture, I could click my computer. I'm going to try to find one first. So in the course offering files, I'm just going to browse. I'm going to go into my folder here. Wherever your images are, it'll link properly. And let's say I want maybe a bad example. There are really no great photos in that folder. Let's back out and do this one instead. There we go. So let's say I wanted to add in this photo. It doesn't really matter what kind of photo, and hit add. This screen's pretty important as well. So because I tried to add in a photo, and how accessibility is really an important factor when making course content, the learning environment has actually asked me, okay, so you're putting an image into this page. If this image needs alt text, this is where I would put that in. So I don't need to go into the HTML code to add in that alt text. I could just type it into this box. And if the image, for example, is decorative, like this ice cream might be, I could always click this. This image is decorative. This will apply an empty alt tag, which tells accessibility screen readers, okay, this image is not really relevant to the content. Feel free to skip over it. So instead, I'm going to not check that box and type in instructor, because that was the name of the picture, and then hit OK. And you'll see it's inserted and replaced that second photo with the picture that I specified. Now, if I dive into the code here, you'll see my image. It's right here. Oh, it's right here, way at the bottom. Okay, that's not supposed to be there. But if I made a mistake, I could always click on it, highlight the text, and slot it up here instead. And you'll notice Alt. So this is the code that is inserting my image, and this is the file path to that image. And if I ever move that image, this link might break. So it's important to have a library of images beforehand that won't be moving anytime soon. And you'll see alt equals instructor. This is the alt tag that I specified before, and it also got a title. And that title basically is the text that appears when you mouse over that image, which helps certain users. So if I hit save here, because I moved that image in the code up to this section, it's appeared up here. And you'll notice when I mouse over, it'll say instructor. Now I'm going to do something else. I'm going to just go back to that image that I just showed you. Let's see if I can find it again. Right here. And you'll see the alt text that I just told you guys about. I'm going to delete that alt text. It's gone now. Save. All right. So the image is still visible. All I did was delete the alt text. If you are ever not sure about whether or not your page is up to snuff when it comes to accessibility, we have a built-in check accessibility button at the bottom here. And this is going to run on the page. So if I just click on this, it's going to say, hey, this image must have alt text. And if I don't know what that means, I can click on this and it'll bring me to a page that tells me what that means. But it also gives me the option to, right in this dialog here, put alt text in. So because I added in another image here and I deleted the alt text, this is no longer accessible. I'm going to put in picture of my instructor. And I'm going to hit repair. And now my accessibility checker is saying everything is good, no accessibility issues detected. Close. And if I look back into my content here, my code rather, I see, okay, there's the alt text I specified right here. Everything is as it should be now. So that is sort of the basic steps on how to insert an image into one of these templates. Now, there are some pretty basic image editing tools within the editor here. So we have rotate, we have flip, and we have edit image. Pretty basic stuff here. We can change the source. We can change the image description, sorry, as well as any dimensions. So just really basic stuff. And this is all done directly within the environment. So this doesn't require you to sort of, exit. And there's also a really basic edit image function here. So if I wanted to get rid of all the color from this image, make it a black and white, or make it entirely black, I could desaturate it a little bit if I wanted to, or I can make it very bright, very saturated. I can do that all within the environment here. And you'll see my image is now very saturated. So directly from the editor, I can sort of achieve that. And I can then try to lay out my image a little better. So I just highlighted my image and I hit this little down arrow here and I did a line right. And this has slotted in my image on the right hand of that column. So after I inserted my image, applied my alt text, made any changes to my image, I just put it where I wanted it to be, which is here. So this is all, this is the sort of control you get with this level of templates. Now, I'm going to give it a title. So my test page. And at the bottom here, there's a button that says publish. So my page has been published, and you'll see there's my double callouts. I have my 2 columns of text and my picture. So that's done. Now it's just like any other page of my course, immediately available to students. So let's talk about the advantages of this. So it's responsive. I don't think I showed you guys that. So like I said before, if I go into cell phone mode here, you'll see, text is now shrunk in size. There are no longer 2 columns. Everything has jumped into 1 column. And then here are my images. Looks like there's a little bit of text here. That's probably because my image is quite small, so it could fit into 1 column. And you'll see the page has jumped into a single column size. So in addition to accessible, it's also responsive. And also it looks good. It looks better than black text on a white page with no sort of dividers, and the text is all sort of full width. There are a few other templates that we could totally get crazy with here. I'll show you a couple more of them. So I'm back in my HTML editor. I'll close that out, and I'll hit the document template. Let's choose my course introduction page, and like before, this warning is telling me your page is about to be deleted. I'm okay with that. So this is what the template's course intro page looks like. So course title, introduction, DUCTION, there we go. And I can type in, I can just paste in any kind of introduction to the course. And if this background image doesn't suit my needs, if I happen to not be making a course about ice cream, I could always do the same thing I did before, which is a highlight. So now that the image is blue, I can tell that I'm selecting it. And you'll see down here, I have the options I had before to edit the image and such. But I'm going to just highlight and then hit insert image. And I'm going to upload, this time I'm going to upload it from my computer. So a brand new image, and I'm going to choose my destination. Choosing your destination at this step is preferable. So rather than just, if you'll see here, the file path, this is currently saving directly to the base folder of your course. So if I were to upload an image without first changing this, it's essentially like downloading an image and just putting it on your desktop, on your computer, not really organizing it in any way. So I'm not gonna do that. I'm gonna organize it. So I'm going to go into my template file. Same place I went to for the last image. I'm gonna make this a little bigger. Go into 01 generic. This is where the template files are. And then I have a folder called IMG, image. I'm gonna hit select path. And you'll see here, now we're saving to that file path. Now I've got an image here. I'm just going to click and drag it into this drop zone. And it very quickly uploaded. And all I have to do is hit add. Oh, again, alt text. This is a decorative image. We don't need alt text. I'm going to hit OK. And you'll see my new background image has been applied. And if I run an update here, you'll see, there we go. This is what my new course intro page looks like. No code involved at all. If I bump back out to my phone mode here. Oh, I should probably run a refresh first. That's weird. There we go. Gotta turn the phone sideways, I guess. And you'll see the padding on the left and the right is gone. So they're not looking at just a tiny box in the center of their screen. Now we can see the text up close, but we still get some of that background image. So if this is also super responsive, so that's something to keep in mind. So that's some of the advantages. Some of the disadvantages of this is that, like I said before, it lacks a little bit of flexibility in the sense that if without knowing any code at all, I wanted to, for example, change the color of this box from blue to green. I wouldn't be able to do that without knowing any sort of code. If I did know some code, I could go into my editor here and make an edit. So you'll see overlay content. That's the div I want to switch here. I'm going to go style equals background color green. So this is called an inline style. This is CSS. Hit save. Oh, I've got that in the wrong place. So I'm actually going to move it. So I put it in the entire row. I probably don't want that. So you'll see this is sort of some of the disadvantages. I'm going to cut that and put it here instead. There we go. Okay, so I made a really quick inline style edit, and I've been able to change that box from green to blue. Now that did require some knowledge of CSS and some knowledge of this template. You know, as you saw, I didn't know which of those div tags to apply that to. It might take a little bit of trial and error to get used to these, but I do know quite a few clients that use these on a regular basis and have totally adapted this template. And another thing to note, if you do have a developer who is willing to make edits to this, they can change things sort of bulk. So if I wanted all of my headers to look a certain way without having to change it every single time, you could always go to the template CSS file directly and make that edit there. so that you wouldn't have to do edits like you just saw me do. So it does lack flexibility, and it does say, like I mentioned, development skills are required to modify the style. That is specifically the style. So content, obviously, like I showed you, no HTML skills required. And to summarize this stage here, the advantages are it's super responsive and accessible, and then pretty much anyone can do it, and it looks pretty good. But some of the disadvantages are it's not, in some cases, flexible, and development skills are required to modify it. Now, an important disclaimer, some clients think that they can sort of download this template and apply it to their course. And by apply it, I mean the course already exists. They just want to download the styles and it to just style the course. Unfortunately, that's not how this works. You have to first develop the content in this template. So we create a new topic, like you saw me before. I hit new, create file, and then I put in my content. If I try to apply the template to a page that already exists, so I edit a page that already exists and choose a template, it's gonna warn me. And then if I hit replace, my changes are gone. My image is gone. Now I could always just hit cancel, and that wouldn't save. But just an important note to just so you guys know that this is purely a proactive solution, and it's not something that can be applied retroactively, if that makes sense. Okay, so before I move on to stage 4, would you guys like to, we've been going for about an hour now, would you guys like to take a break, or should we just power through here? I'm going pretty quick.
I'm okay to keep going. I don't know how everybody else feels.
Okay, we'll keep going then. So at level 4, advanced course development, like I mentioned before, is sort of an extra level of HTML content. So we're still dealing with HTML. However, this is HTML that might be too complex to edit within the BrightSpace editor. So just to sort of contrast the differences between these, what you saw just before this was what we consider level 3 non-developer templates. These are the free templates that are available on community. And what I will be showing you from now on are level 4 templates, developer templates, that were not made in the learning environment. They were made in an offline environment, so just on my computer, not on the web, and then uploaded to the environment. So, and the reason why that these templates don't necessarily work in that editor are because the editor currently isn't at a level where it can edit certain aspects of HTML that aren't visible. So for example, if I have a click and reveal, I won't be able to edit the text that will be revealed, if that makes sense, because it's not visible and I can't click the button. So I'll show you what I mean in a second, but essentially the difference is level 4 templates are not made in the environment and are instead coded by somebody who knows HTML and CSS. So like I just mentioned, the workflow are the courses are built outside of BrightSpace, so locally on your computer, not on the web, and then uploaded. So the drawbacks are it does require the knowledge of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. However, the benefits of this are that we have all of the benefits. We have a consistent design with branding. It's efficient. It allows for more interactive elements. It's accessible. It's responsive. This is sort of the highest level of content. This is what we at Learning Creative Services. This is the level that we develop our courses at. And I'll show you what some of these look like in a second here. But I just want to head back to this graphic and just describe the process a little more. So like we showed before, we have our content, which might start off in a Word document, PowerPoint, etc. We take the content out of those, we combine them. So instead of like the level 3 templates where we put images and image layouts, videos and video layouts, text and text layouts, having the flexibility to code pages to suit the content gives you the advantages to combine layouts, to combine content and really mesh together, different types of content. And then finally upload them to BrightSpace. So the process, this is the most complicated one. I know a lot of clients that are currently at this process and are developing very high level course content, and it looks great. And I'll show you an example of that right now. So I have a course here. We developed this course. It's just called Leadership Showcase. So if I were a student, I'm actually going to view as a student here so that you guys get a better view. So I'm viewing this as a student right now, and I just landed on this course. I am on that course's homepage. Now what you see here is some custom widgets that we developed. And this particular one is called a visual table of contents. This doesn't come stock with BrightSpace. This is a custom widget that we developed internally. But basically, if I were a student, I'd have the option to sort of look at each of my modules, see my current progress of that module, view a brief overview of that module. And if I want to, I can hit continue, and it will take me directly into wherever I was last. So I'm not going to do that because, as you see, I'm already 6 out of 16 topics completed. I visited this course before. I'm instead going to just click on the module's name, and this takes me right into module 1. Normally, if you don't have this sort of widget, there would be a button in your nav bar just called content. So that'd be how the student would normally take it. Now this is a jump into module 1 here. And then the first page is labeled Unstyled Introduction Page. And you'll be familiar with this page. This is the page that I showed you guys back in level 2. This is what just a normal course introduction page would look like if I were to just paste it directly into the environment. Now the next page is the same content, just styled. So if you'll remember, the last page has 3 bullet points, learning outcomes, with a header and a summary. This page is what might look like if you added in some decorative imagery and some iconography. And you'll see it looks a lot better. Like we have a lot of visual engagement here, and your eye is darting across the page, very engaging. And if I hop back into phone mode, still looks good. Everything still works. Everything still looks good. So I'll click through some of the pages here, just so you guys can get a better idea. This is just a stock BrightSpace checklist. If I continue on here, okay, we have a tab. So if I wanted to add in some extra interest, I could layer my content. So not have it all immediately visible on a page. Instead, we have this is what we would call a graphic tab, because there's images associated with each of the titles. And you'll see here, these are different leadership styles. I'm currently selecting autocratic, so that's blue and underlined. And if I want to click democratic, click, and the text at the bottom here changes. So I can sort of, at my own pace, click through each of the topics, and it gives the learner something to do, forces them to engage with the page and really look at it and figure out, okay, what am I going to look at next? Oh, when we have images accompanied with the headers to make each style a little more memorable. And there's also a decorative border here. This is just done with HTML and CSS. Nothing too fancy from a code perspective, but it makes a big difference. And you'll see here, this is a type of callout box. So similar to the blue one that you saw back in level 3 template, we call this one a block quote. So you can develop a bunch of different callouts and have them used for certain things. So this particular callout was developed with quotes in mind. And you'll see here, we have a John F. Kennedy quote that has a certain style, an icon associated with it, and who said it. So it does help you structure content a lot better when it's not just kind of sitting in with the rest of it. It makes it really obvious without saying, this is a quote, it makes it obvious. And at the bottom here, we actually have a little activity, which is kind of awesome. So if I hit start activity here, this was coded using JavaScript. This page is asking me a quick question. Now these, to be clear, what you're seeing here is not graded. We call these inline assessments. So just really quick knowledge checks, to check so the learner can immediately recall information. And it does help them learn a little better, hopefully. So if I answer this question here, click on my answer and hit check answer, I got it wrong. And it's going to tell me that with an X, and my results will be shown here. Your answer was not correct. It's going to tell me what the correct answer was and give me some feedback. Okay, so if I hit next question, oh, this one's a multi-select. So I'm going to try to get this one right. That looks good. And now I can hit check answer. And it's gone ahead and given me a perfect score, told me the correct answers and what I clicked, and then give me the feedback. And you'll see there's 4 paragraphs of feedback. That's because I selected 4 things, and each of these things had a custom feedback. So this certainly adds a lot of visual engagement. It forces the user to interact with the page itself. Really takes the online, feel of the course to the next level. Now this one is getting a little more advanced here. This is a sort of a click and drop interaction. This was coded using just JavaScript, just HTML and JavaScript. And basically I have 3 things I can click and drag. So I can drag them to certain boxes, and I got the wrong answer. So, he's changed to a sad person. Maybe he likes that. Nope, still not happy. There we go. So that's an example of, how we can take interaction using HTML and JavaScript to the next level and really make courses really interesting. Let me see. And we can take, this is what we would call a hotspot. And what a hotspot is just an image where you can click on certain areas of that image. Hotspots. So you'll see there's a box around this lady here. Let's get motivated. So if I click on her, I get a little pop-up, and she talks about, things, whatever the subject matter might be. And I can just kind of click on each of the people in the room and learn a little bit about them. It could be about anything, really. So these are just activities that we found are a really good way to take that level of engagement to the to the maximum level. And this is just a video, but it's actually what we would call, I hope I'm not able to mute that. You guys can't hear this video, can you?
Yeah, there's some sound coming through.
Oh, okay.
We're in the middle of practice, Leanne. Thank you later.
So it's showing me a clip here.
You remember when we first met and went to that horrible party down to buy us rest of clothes?
And now it's asked me a question. So it's asking me what type of leadership I see. I will answer the question. Let's say coaching. I was right. Feedback correct. Continue. And the video keeps playing. So this is just another example of how we can take that engagement up. So to summarize the advantages of these of taking this kind of high level approach to course development is it's custom. So you can make it look however you'd like it to make it to look. It's flexible. You can make any assortment of layouts, any sort of layouts, any sort of content, interactions. It's branded. You can apply your organization's colors. You can put a footer, a header, a banner. You can do any sort of thing accessible. So like I mentioned with the previous two steps, this is HTML, and screen readers will read the text as well as see the alt text of those images. And I didn't demonstrate it for you, but those tabs that you saw me earlier, I could have operated those with my keyboard. Just use my arrow keys and my tab button to select each of those. And it's responsive. So like I showed you, you can zoom it down to a small phone size screen, and it still looks good, and it's yours. Essentially, what that means is this is unique to your institution. Nobody else's looks like yours. It's distinct. It does. This approach certainly does have its advantages. However, the disadvantages is that it's a significant time investment. Now, it is my job to make these all the time, and we have a standard policy of about 20 minutes a page. It takes me 20 minutes to make a page of content. So depending on how much content your course might have, that's hours and hours and hours and hours of work per course. So it's certainly a significant time investment for sure. And like I mentioned before, development and design skills are required to do this level of course development. So like Stacy and Ashley said, they're comfortable with HTML. So, that's maybe not a problem for you guys because you have some people that are interested in HTML and are familiar with it and comfortable with it. So this is certainly an attainable level of course development for you guys. And it's also, however, maintenance does require development skills. So a lot of what we do as well is maintaining older courses. So going back and updating courses and maintaining courses. This level of content takes development skills to create and maintain. So that's just sort of something to keep in mind, that they're not something that you just make and they're kind of good forever. If you ever need to update them, somebody who knows this sort of, that have these skills would need to sort of do those maintenance tasks. So to summarize the advantages and disadvantages of this type, it's custom, it's flexible, it's branded, it's accessible, it's responsive, and it's yours. However, it does represent a significant time investment. Development and design skills are required, and maintenance requires development skills. Now, for the developers in the room, I'm just going to go over a little bit how we specifically develop. So here at Creative Services, we use code editors. So I will switch to a different project here. Let's go to my templates folder. So what we use is, I'm using Brackets. You'll see Brackets is a free tool, and we have this listed right at the top, common editors. And this is what Brackets looks like. And this is offline. So this is a program that I downloaded onto my computer, and I'm now manipulating files. And if I see here, I have all of Creative Services different templates. So we have like 5 standard templates. And basically we derive the templates we develop from these different layouts. And if I look into the code here, I'm going to look into template A, and I see I have all these different pages, and each of these pages have images associated with them. And this is the code view, so you won't actually see the page itself, because like I said, this is all offline. So this is what a code editor looks like, and you can feel free to kind of use whatever you're comfortable with, but I recommend Brackets because it's free and it's good. So the core technologies surrounding this level of development are HTML, CSS, JavaScript, or in our case, jQuery, but vanilla JavaScript is fine too, and a front-end web framework called Bootstrap. Now, you'll remember back when I was editing code, see if I can find that again. So if I look at my code here, so this is the page I made before back in level 3, edit HTML. Oh, I'm viewing as a student still. All right, let's back out. And I'm not a student anymore. I can now edit the HTML. So if you'll remember, if I go into the code view here, there's all of this extra stuff. And this is Bootstrap, and it's essentially the framework we use to make our websites a lot easier to use, responsive, accessible, all that sort of thing. It's a great framework. It's totally free. It's always up to date. And you'll see we have things like classes like container fluid, rows, columns. These are things provided to us by the Bootstrap front-end framework. Now, this is a framework with a very verbose library of documentation, which if you wanted to become familiar with, would be totally free. And if you are already familiar with HTML, relatively easy. So just so that you guys get a little idea of what HTML is, I know some of you might not be familiar with HTML. I'm going to just give you a very brief high-level description of what HTML is, essentially. And all HTML is the content structure of a page. So when you're looking at HTML, what you're actually looking at is layouts and sections of a page. So if I were to use the analogy of a hamburger, you'll see I have different containers. So my bun, my bread, it contains the lettuce, tomato, and the meat, and a hamburger contains everything, and then lunch contains everything. So it's a content structure. HTML isn't inherently stylish. In fact, back at level 2, when we were just pasting content directly into the editor, that was still HTML, even if it didn't look good. So HTML is just document structure. But CSS is style. So if HTML were a skeleton, CSS would be the skin, the shirt, and the pants that were sitting on the skeleton. So HTML aids with the structure of a web document, and CSS tells the browser what the content should look like. So if you'll remember back here, when I typed style equals background color :green, what I did was I typed CSS into the HTML to tell the browser, okay, this particular box has a background color of green. So what I was doing, I wasn't editing HTML, even though it was in the HTML editor. I was typing CSS into a certain tag. And I normally, if I can show you guys an example, CSS looks a little different. So this is what a CSS page looks like from an offline view. You'll see here, HTML body. These are targeting certain areas of the document. So if I look at this, I have a body tag. I'm actually, what this is doing is editing the body tag. So I say, okay, everything that's inside the body tag has this font. So it lets you apply style. So obviously, you know, that this sort of makes this, all this says is essentially all text is Arial. And I also load in a second font there. That's just a little bit more advanced. That lets you choose different font families later on. It's cascading. It's a little more complicated, but essentially that's what this means. And I can say, you know, headers look like this. If I go to my typography page here, I can say, okay, links, and A is a link. They have a color of this. This one, that when you hover over the link, it changes color to this, essentially. So that's just kind of a high level overview of what CSS is. And I jumped a little farther ahead here. I showed you guys that already, but I'm going to just keep going here. So this is a little bit more in-depth look, this section anyways, about certain sections of our template. Now, basically, what we call a template is just a collection of different pieces of code. And by that, I mean a callout is a piece of code. A image is a piece of code. Just different sections of code that you can reuse in other places. So this is an example of a timeline. So if I go back to this course here, I'll show you what that might look like. So since I'm in level 4 now, this is what our template looks like. So it's everything. And at the top here, we have our course colors. So this is where we apply that consistent branding. Now these are D2L's colors. So this is our corporate look and feel. And we just lay out all of the colors that will be used. And then we say, okay, this is what our headers are going to look like. This is what our paragraphs look like. This is what block quotes will look like. Links, they change color when you mouse over them. These are all things that we consider before we even start looking at content. And you'll see we can get different elements here. We can make lists look a lot different. Different callouts here. I'm just going to scroll down to, okay, timeline, here we go. So let's say if you were trying to describe a very specific type of content. So if you were teaching a history class, it might be beneficial to create a timeline. Now, these are elements that, anybody with HTML and CSS should be able to code. It's essentially just a box with a line next to it and a little arrow. Pretty simple. However, you can copy and paste these as many times as you need them to. So once you make it once, you have it forever. It's pretty useful. I'm going to show you a couple more here. Just as some high-level examples of different pieces of code. We have things like accordions. We have things like tabs. These are what they would look like on our end, the back end, before they get in front of the student. We develop all these ahead of time so that we have them ready when we need them. Flip cards. If you were if you were presenting a lot of very small bites of content, you could use something like this. All kinds of things, So we have the next slide here. It just talks about what the work of editing a click and reveal might be. So if I look at this is what we call a click and reveal. Now to edit the click and reveal, you couldn't necessarily see the content because you have to click on this button first. So to edit that, you wouldn't necessarily be able to do that without looking at the code, because in the editor, it's not visible yet. So you would have to first go into your HTML source editor, like I showed you before, find where in the code the content is, and change it in the code. So it's possible in the environment, but only after it's already there, if that makes sense. I'm just going to click ahead here. Okay, so interactive assessment tools. I went over some of these already. Let me just find it really quick here. Inline assessment tool, interactive assessment tools, excuse me, are that sort of quiz activity you saw me do before. We call these, we actually, we sell these. They're unfortunately not free, but basically they look like this. So this is a hotspot. Like I said before, they add in a layer of interaction. So we have 5 of them: inline quiz, matching, hotspot, multi-select, and sequencing. These are things that, are optional to you. And, if you wanted to make your own version, you certainly could. Just all we did was use HTML and CSS. And this lets me click around an image and learn more about each of the elements. So I can click on the people of an image and tell them, and answer a question. So that's what we would call a hotspot. This is a matching activity. So we can say, if I just click around here, click and drag each of the images into their proper bucket. And for accessibility reasons, we have very verbose instructions. So the user can immediately understand, okay, match each of the item to the appropriate category. For keyboard users, you can use your tab key to select an answer from the list, and then the enter key to select it. So because I just click and drag them, all I have to do is check answers. And it's just going to generate a report for me and say, you scored 3 to 3, showed me how I did. I got perfect. So that's a matching activity. This is a multi-select. I haven't shown you guys this one yet, but essentially this is a grid. So we have different categories and different rows. We can select different boxes and check if I'm right. So this is if maybe more than one answer is right. Okay, I didn't do very well, but essentially this is what we would call a graphic multi-select. And finally, you guys are familiar with this one already. This is what we would call an inline quiz. This just lets me ask a very simple question. So totally ungraded, totally, very quick, very right in the content tool, very quick, just question and answer. So that's interactive assessment tools. So our courseware development process, this section is sort of separate from the rest of the presentation. Like I mentioned before, this section is really honing in on how we in creative services develop course content as a process. So this section is not necessarily about how to develop, but who's involved in developing and sort of the bigger picture, which might be useful to your organization since you guys are just starting out. So essentially, we're going to start by just meeting our team. Now, we have Lego people around our office here. I have one on my desk. It looks just like me. These are great representations here. So essentially, we have 4 core members of our development group. We have a project manager who is in charge of sort of the first stage, planning and analysis. We kind of plan out the course's development schedule and figure out, okay, what are the needs of this course, And the instructional designer is sort of in charge of designing the course, What does the courses look and feel? What does the courses look and feel like? If the course is for children, an instructional designer might say, let's make it very colorful. Let's make the text very big. These are sort of decisions that get made early on in the development process to make sure that your learners are being properly targeted. The next stage is basically what I spent the last hour talking about, which is the development stage. And essentially, that is where I, courseware developer, come in and actually turn that content into an HTML template, which I then use to put the content in. So like I showed you before, basically using my brackets, I just take the content that an instructional designer has given to me and put it into an HTML file that I coded myself. And then I would proceed to launch the course, which is where I would then take the HTML content that I developed in my program and upload it up to my course. And then from there, I would link it to the content tool. And then finally, maintenance. Usually in this stage, we just make a maintenance plan, a review schedule, who is going to maintain it, that sort of thing. Now, The next slide here, these slides are just kind of going to go into depth about each of the phases. This might be more useful for you guys because your team is a little more all over the place. So we also have remote employees here, and we use tools like Trello, like you'll see at the bottom there. Basically, they're just different tools that we use to organize different tasks. As you see, we have a sample course here. Module 4 is currently in design phase, and we are currently developing module 3. Free programs like these are going to help your team sort of figure out what to do next, what makes sense, and make notes. There's a lot of programs like Trello. We're not being paid by Trello or anything, but we do use it and it's free. So I definitely recommend that. Next is sort of the design phase. We start off with a brand guideline. Now, you guys probably already have a brand guideline for your institution. What are your logos? What is your font type? What colors should you be using? You probably already have this. So you might move on to the next stage, a wireframe. This is kind of an extra step. Maybe you have an interaction that you want to have the students kind of go through. You probably wouldn't want to sit down and develop that from start to finish without really knowing what that experience feels like. So I would then suggest you do a wireframe, which is what would happen in design phase. And then finally, a prototype. Now, a prototype is essentially a coded HTML document. So a prototype is basically, if I zoom back here really quick, I can show you what that might look like. So you'll see here, this is what a prototype might look like. So instead of having real content, we have different pages showcasing the look and feel of your course. So before I develop any content, we put in dummy content so that we kind of see what it might look like when it's done, and we make a prototype. So this lets us kind of make any changes early on that won't spend a lot of our time later making after the fact. So I definitely recommend that be a part of your process. The next stage is development. So you guys are really familiar with this stage. Basically, we develop our HTML template, our course templates. We decide, okay, this page layout is going to be used for the intro pages. This one's used for conclusions. This one's going to be used for videos. The design decisions are already made. You just have to sort of create the layouts. And in this stage, I've also included an extra line here, choosing which template you're going to be using. Are you going to be uploading documents, or are you going to use one of our non-developer templates, or perhaps you will be coding one of your own? These are sort of the decisions that will be made at this stage. And then finally, so the course has been developed. Okay, now we need to make sure the course is up to quality, up to standards. Basically, this is a big step, especially for educational institutions, because the quality of your courses are, in some cases, mandated by legislation. So making sure that you follow the accessibility checklist. And I kept that kind of broad intentionally, because depending on where you are, certain rules may or may not apply to you. So it's important to know which rules do apply to you. And before you launch your course to students, make sure to go through the checklist and check, do all my images have alt text? Do all of my videos have closed caption? These are sorts of things that you kind of must consider in the QA phase, as well as mobile checks. So you saw me do that with my Chrome browser. I kind of faked it because I didn't actually take a cell phone out. I just turned my Google Chrome browser into a cell phone, but go through the course as if you were using it on a phone. In a lot of cases, I actually use for every course I develop, my personal cell phone. And I don't have a very big cell phone. I like my cell phone is nice and small. So I have a good edge case. So basically I go through my course and make sure, okay, yeah, this image has correctly bumped to the top of the page. Everything has sort of bumped into a single column of content. These are sort of the checks that we would do at this phase. And then cross-browser checks. That's a bit of a technical requirement. In some cases, you might have certain browsers that don't like certain types of HTML. So, for example, if I only ever test my course on my Google Chrome and a Mac user who is using Safari comes and tries to use my course, what if perhaps something doesn't load for them? This is the stage where we really step through our course and check, okay, this course is accessible, this course is responsive, this course works on every browser. Before they go out to anybody, we always make sure that our course checks all three of these boxes. And then usually we do a final launch phase sort of check here. Now, what we do is we walk through it as a student. So sort of like what you saw me do before, I go to the top of my page here and I view as a student because I'm an admin right now. So I see things that the student might not see. I go through my course. I'm going to hit continue here and see, okay, so now I'm like a student and okay, everything looks good. Normally this only really applies to tests or perhaps release conditions, because everything looks the same whether you're a student or an admin in most cases. But it's always worth a shot to walk through your course if it has anything like grades, release conditions, or intelligent agents applied to it. If you guys aren't familiar with those, the BrightSpace training will certainly get you familiar. Release conditions are you can't see something until you do something else. So I don't get to see the quiz until I look at every page of content, as an example. And intelligent agents is something like you can set up a certain condition. So once the student completes a course, they get an email immediately telling them their grade. That sort of thing can be set up with intelligent agents. And they're important to test in the QA phase. So certainly something I recommend walking through as a student yourself. And finally, maintenance. So like I mentioned before, planning for course maintenance is going to make a big difference later on. Because if, for example, something in the course needs to be changed, having a plan to say who's going to be making revisions, who's going to be, making any development changes, who's going to be doing any of these sorts of things beforehand is going to save you a lot of trouble later on before rolling out your content. So that was essentially sort of an overview of our course development process from start to finish. And so the last section here is best practices. So this is a little more general, a little bit more less related to content and more about how sort of options and settings and methods that we use while we're developing our courses that we have found to be the most efficient. And I'll pause here and just sort of ask if anybody, I know I'm going a little fast here, but if anyone has any questions, does anyone have any questions about the courseware development process as I've described it here? No? Okay, cool. And if I'm not pushing or anything, but if you guys want to take a little break, I do have about 20 slides more of stuff. If you guys would like to take a 10-minute break, or do you guys just want to power through again? All right, sounds like we want to keep going. Looking forward to it. All right, so this is the best practice section. To start, we we don't use the table of contents to create. So, sorry, let me rephrase this. So you'll see on the left, that is a course's table of contents. So you'll see table of contents, course information, day 1, day 2, day 3. That's what the student sees. So what we try to do is in our development cycle, we have identified as a best practice to sort of lay out our folder structure to mirror the course's structure. So on the left, you see day 1, day 2, day 3. On the right, this is what the course's files system looks like. We have module 1, module 2, and module 3. And all of the files for module 1 are in the module 1 folder, and so on and so forth. So essentially, this is a good time for us to just sort of organize our course's files to make sure that, you know, everything makes sense and is going to be organized from start to finish. So I'm going to do a little bit more explanation about the course's managed files. So I'm going to zip back into the course here, and I'm going to remember to turn off view as a student. Okay. So if I go into here, I'm going to look at my HTML template. And so this is what the folder looks like on the back end. So this is not, the student never sees this. This is sort of the course's back end file system, sort of like a folder on your computer. And we organize things in a very particular way that helps make our lives a little easier. So as you saw before, we separate our content into module folders so that we know the course files related to module 1 are in the folder labeled module 1. And if we need to make any assets that available to everything, we put it outside of those folders in a folder called assets. And inside this folder, we find things like our CSS file, our common images. And, you know, if you have a logo that's going to apply on every single footer, you might not want to have to copy and paste that image every time you need it, you know, and copy it a bunch of times. Instead, just point to it in the same place. And you might also find our JavaScript. This is where we'll put any of the code the scripts that might be running through our course content. And then inside our course, we have, we like to do this, label the file names with a page number. So I'm in module 1, and you'll see we have a course introduction, meet your facilitator, module introduction. We have our images folder and our docs folder, and we have things labeled. So we order the pages by page number. So we have 01, page 1, and then the name of the file, of the folder, file. Just a short descriptive title about what that page is about, what content will I find on that. That's where I'd see that. So this is sort of how we organize our file structure. And let me tell you, it saves a lot of headache later on when you need to find something or update something and everything is disorganized. It's going to help you a lot in the long run. So that's sort of how we set it up. Now, this is called Course Builder. Course Builder is a tool in the environment that lets you make bulk changes to your course very quickly. Now, I'm not super familiar with that tool, but I can zoom into it and show you what that might look like. So, Course Builder. So this lets me do a lot of things really quickly. So if I go into my folder here, and I have my different levels, level 4, I can make certain decisions really quickly. So if I want to add a link, I can do create a link and put it somewhere, you know, a link to something, you know. Okay, I want to put it here. Where do I want to link it to? I'll create a link to a checklist. Save. So really quickly, without even looking at the table of contents in the other tool, I threw in a link. And certain decisions like these can be made really quickly using this tool. I don't use it a whole lot, but if you find yourself, really repetitively going through your course and, copy pasting links and, you might find it to be a lot easier to add in content and do certain things from this view instead. So that's sort of what Course Builder looks like. So learning environment tools, you guys are probably already pretty familiar with this. So I'm just going to do a very brief sort of checklist about how we do each of these in sort of the order we do them. So for example, quizzing. We start by importing the questions, assigning restrictions, and associating grade items. Now, one thing I'll show you guys is if you find yourself making a lot of quizzes, so for example, if I go to quizzing here, this quiz is currently empty. If I want to go, okay, let's add a new multiple choice question. Okay, I have to type the question, question, whatever, option 1. And I can just sort of put in each of my options. And I'm going to decide, okay, option 4 is correct. And it shows me a little example on the right and hit save. Okay, so I added in, that was just a single question. Now there are tools that can make that faster. So we have a tool that we didn't develop. One of our clients actually developed it called the D2L question import tool. And this will be included in the package I'll be putting in your environment. And essentially what this lets you do is write questions really quickly. So if I wanted to do the same thing I just did, question, whatever the question is, and I can just do option. And the right one would be this. And if I want, like as you see, I just put an asterisk in front of it. That tells this converter that's the correct one. Let's say I wanted to do a matching order, a matching question. I can type in match at the start and then type in, this is a matching question. So option 1 is matched with other option 1 and option 2, other option 2. And basically what this will do is really quickly, if I hit create CSV file, it'll ask me, okay, where do you want to save this? I can just put in, save it to my desktop here. And instead of going through the BrightSpace interface, which is fast if you're only making small edits, I can instead do upload file, browse for files. I'm going to upload the file I just made, test CSV, import all. And you'll see the question that I developed is here. This is option 1, option 2, option 3. And the one I put an asterisk, you'll notice the asterisk is gone, and that's now marked as correct. And if I go to my matching question, you'll see the word matching I put at the start. You'll notice I put matching. And there's documentation that comes with this, so you don't have to remember this. That just tells the processor here that this is a matching question, and that's been removed. And you'll see option 1, option 2. They're matched with each other. So this is a process that I have found to be the fastest when it comes to making quizzes. I make a lot of quizzes, and it saves me immense amount of time using this tool in certain cases. Like I said, if you're making small tweaks, it doesn't save a lot of time. But if you're someone like me and who makes a lot of quizzes, it's definitely going to be worth just downloading this and getting to know how it works a little. Now, on to the next thing, which is assignments. Pretty self-explanatory. You write your assignment description, set a due date, give it a grade item, and it's just a container for students to submit assignments to. And discussions. They're just you write your description, and you can optionally assign a grade at them. And the students, like a comment section on Facebook or something, can have a discussion with each other, and have that be maybe graded if you'd like it to be. I know when I was going through school, I did a lot of these for my social studies classes. That helped a lot. So those are just sort of the bullet points on how to get that set up. And like I mentioned before, release conditions are, they add barriers to the course so that the students must first complete something. And basically the steps to this are what content needs releasing, what should trigger the release, and then making sure you test, because if you make a mistake and a student ends up, very confused because their test isn't showing up, and maybe you didn't select the right setting. It's important to test these things, like I mentioned before, in the testing phase of your course. And then groups. Groups are also pretty advanced. They let you group students and have assessments based on that group. So, a group assignment folder. And once you create a group, you can create group-specific activities. So a group assignment folder is different than a normal assignment folder, because a group one, everyone has access to the same bin if they're part of the same group, and only receive a single grade, for example. So these are tools that you'll probably be encountering. Grades, there's really high level here, just 2 types of grades, essentially. I know your organization is pretty interested in CBE, so this might not be super relevant to you guys, but just so you know, there's weighted, which is out of 100%, or points. So you must achieve a certain number of points before you can complete a course, for example. And also categories. So you'll see this is a weight, an example of a weighted course. And this is a category, and this is a category, quizzes and discussions. And on the right-hand column here, you'll see a weight. So discussions are worth 40% of your total grade, and quizzes are worth 60. And the reason why it says 25, 25, 25, 25 is because, for example, they're all evenly distributed in weight among that 60%. So module 1 is worth 25% of that 60%. So without having to sort of do that math in your head when you're calculating your grade, that is sort of kind of automatically done for you if you set up your grades into categories beforehand. So I always recommend, instead of making, for example, module 1 quiz outside of a category and, doing 60 divided by 4 and then putting that as the weight, it's just easier to do it this way, because if you ever need to add in one or get rid of one, it's a lot easier to do. So BrightSpace has a few video solutions that work kind of integrated into it. So there's the pretty basic LE, learning environment video topics, which is actually just essentially, if I back out here, going to a module and clicking new video. And it says you can paste your embed code or upload a video. So that is what I mean by LE video topics. So that's kind of a really basic way to get a video into the environment. The next being BrightSpace Capture, which is D2L's home-baked video platform. Lets you do live streaming, a bunch of other stuff, and it kind of lives with your environment. So instead of maybe having a video on YouTube where anyone can see it, you could put it on your capture. Virtual Classroom is a plugin that works well with BrightSpace. Essentially, this lets you have like group webcam meetings or have students submit video assignments. So rather than just uploading a document, you could have a real video assignment. So these are sort of the tools, some of the tools that you can use. And of course, the big ones work, YouTube, Vimeo, all that sort of thing. Just paste in that embed code right into that this text box here, and it will work. So these are some of the solutions that you can use for that. Just as a note, accessibility best practices. All videos should have a transcript and closed captions. So a transcript is a text alternative version of that video where everything said in the video is in a script, and closed caption is text on the screen. These days, I think they're both required for educational content. So I think it's worth making sure that any videos you put into your courses, they have both of those things. So just as a note. And there's some other third-party tools, integrations. We have ReadSpeaker, Google Apps, Office, Kaltura, and Respondus. Basically, these are just sort of additional pieces you can plug into your environment that let you do certain things that the environment might not. So Google Apps lets you upload directly from your Google Drive account rather than having to first download it. ReadSpeaker adds in a little robot voice that'll read every single page of content in your course out loud to your learners. That sort of thing. Respondus helps you, if you're worried about academic dishonesty, you could get Respondus to kind of prevent your students from Googling questions, for example. And then there's some other tools that I think are worth mentioning. In courseware development, we call them RATs. RAT stands for Rapid Authoring Tools. And basically what those are tools like Articulate Storyline and Twine. And they're sort of, graphic user interface based tools that let you click and drag, text around and make course content without looking at code. Those aren't owned by D2L or even affiliated with us. They're just sort of third-party tools that might help you if you need to do course content but don't necessarily have developers. Those are some options that you could try to consider. So those are pretty much the big third-party tools. Does anybody have any questions about this section at all? Nope. Okay, so I will continue on here. I'm nearly done, making record time today. Just some resources. These are sort of links in the PowerPoint that you can feel free to look at later on. But essentially, if you're not aware already, BrightSpace Community, which is the site where our level 3 HTML templates reside, by the way, is the #1 place to find any answers to questions you might have about BrightSpace. We have, people from other institutions that don't necessarily work at D2L that are super helpful. And of course, we're always there if you need us to answer any questions. So I would definitely recommend community.brightspace.com be one of your bookmarks. If you ever have any questions, there's a search bar right at the top. Ask your question here. It'll do a quick search. If it finds a question that sounds something like yours, it'll show you. And if it doesn't, it'll show you how to post the question. So really great site. I use it, even though I've been using this for 3 years. So, we also have a documentation site for basically just a lot of the more technical aspects of D2L, very specific interactions. You can find that on BrightSpace Help, as well as some of our video channels. We have a YouTube channel that have a ton of video tutorials that, that show you how to do anything from creating a quiz to uploading documents. It's all available on our YouTube channel, which is always there. Some of the collaboration tools I talked about, Trello, which is our task software that we use here, the learning environment manage files, Google, Google Drive, Skype, Slack. We use all these sort of softwares to help aid collaboration because some of our team, don't work in this building. These tools make a lot of sense. Resources, prototyping tools. These are some of the tools that we used to do prototypes. If you'll remember back in our design phase, These are some of the tools that we use. QA tools. This one's kind of a big one because essentially these are the tools that we use to make sure our courses do meet those checks. And if you're developing course content, you'll certainly want to visit these because a lot of the time they're required. So websites like WebAIM, which is a website that basically is the holy grail of information when it comes to web accessibility. And as you see here, I have this bookmark. This is to let me know, if I have very bright blue text on my white background, is that going to be accessible? You'll see as the text gets very light, gets very faint, hard to see. It tells me if I pass or fail. And WCAG is essentially the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. And there's actually, checklists on this page that you can use to sort of test your own courses against these checklists. Very, very useful. If you guys are developing course content at all, you'll definitely want to be visiting these checks, these sites here. And you'll see Chrome Developer Tools is just what you saw me using there with that mobile version. So if you have Google Chrome, if you just hit F12, it might not automatically do that, but this you'll see a box come up, F12, and you can click on Toggle Device Toolbar, little button at the top. This lets you play around with different devices. These are a lot of the tools we use for testing as well. And that link just takes you to a page that sort of better describes that. We have HTML and CSS validator. If you're new to code and something's not working, you can paste your code into these websites and it'll tell you what's wrong with them, as well as the JavaScript and JSON validator if you're doing some scripting. And again, accessibility checks. So the top line is the BrightSpace accessibility checker. That was that little button I pressed at the bottom of the screen that says, hey, you didn't put alt text here. That is a link to just a little bit more of a description as to how that works. Screen readers, accessibility, people who might not be able to see very well use screen readers. And these are links to the two popular ones, JAWS and NVDA. NVDA is free. If you want to use that in your testing, you can feel free to download that and go through your course as if you were blind, and see hey, is my course accessible? There's only one way to know for sure, is test it yourself. And these are some of the other tools that we use as well. I didn't get a chance to show you guys. And that's actually it. So if anybody has any questions about, anything I talked about in the last 2 hours, feel free to ask now. I'm sorry I didn't take a lot of breaks.
I guess nobody has any questions for you.
Yeah, I guess I did a really good job then. Okay, that's all right.
And you said these slides would be available where?
Yeah, I actually was about to get to that. So I need, I'd like your permission, whoever is in charge of your environment, to actually create a course. It won't be visible to students or anything, but I want to make a course in your environment, and I'll be putting the video recording of this presentation, the slides, and links to anything I talked about during this presentation, all right into your environment, and then I will email you a link. Does that make sense?
Sorry, yes.
Okay, all right, so I'll do that. You'll get a link from me sometime today with a link to that course. And you'll find all the resources, this recording, these slides, all there.
No, I have a question. I do have one question.
Okay.
We do have a course in our environment called BrightSpace instructor videos. Would that be a good spot for it?
Sure.
Or do we have a separate location for it?
Nope. I can upload it there too. I usually create a separate location, but if you prefer me put it there, that sounds perfect too.
Okay. Whichever is easiest.
That is definitely the easiest way. So I'll upload it to your instructor's videos course, put a little module, and I'll put all the content into that.
Okay.
So great. All right. So we're a little ahead of schedule here. There was another hour of this, but you guys seem to know what you're doing. So
either that or we were all lost.
oh no, I hope not. But if anyone else, if nobody else has any questions, I guess we could end it a little early.
Okay.
If that's okay with you. Okay.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Well, awesome. I will pause our recording here. Okay. And all right. So just to remind you guys, my email address is on the first slide or second slide of this presentation. Like I said, I'm available to answer any questions you have about anything in this presentation over the next few weeks. So if you ever have any questions, feel free to send me an email. I'll get back to you as soon as I can.
All right. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome, and you'll hear from me soon.
Okay, thank you.
Good day, guys.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Bye.